But what about Saudi Arabia for this region beating Argentina? Not just because they've beaten Argentina, because this was written as Messi's World Cup, wasn't it? And we've had to listen to Gabriel Batistuta give Jim White a lecture about how England can't defend. Score, Saudi Arabia 2, Argentina 1. Welcome to a World Cup special edition of One to One with Simon Jordan here in Doha, in this luxurious hut. Don't forget, of course, to keep liking and subscribing, but more importantly, because we've got another edition to come shortly, keep leaving those brilliant questions in the comment section below. But let's get on with this World Cup special. Obviously the story at this moment in time, because his performance against Iran, we must get context, albeit we're seeing results come in, shock results, like the Argentinian game with the Saudi Arabians, and I've made a lot of the performance that England played against Iran, but Iran was substandard opposition. But Saka is one of those players that's on the cusp of launching what will be potentially a stellar career. I've got some very close friends that are very big Arsenal fans that have been raving about this kid for about 3, maybe 2.5, 3 years. When he first broke into the Arsenal first team, we know he's not a surprise. Now we move into the territory, of course, for the purpose of what you value players at and how good players are often determined by their price tags. What he is a player that has unique ability. He's on a journey where he can probably write his own ticket. So when we talk about what is a £100 million footballer, you look at Jack Grealish because he's the incarnation of it. You look at Neymar again, and I don't think that he's potentially at the Neymar level and may never get to that, but what he is a very, very good player. So in the economics of football, which is La La Land, you would be able to make a case, not just on the back of the fact that he's done well in one game, but the component parts of what he's achieving at Arsenal, what he's beginning to achieve at international level, and given his age and ability, he will be on a trajectory that if Arsenal were to sell him, you'd be starting to move into that territory. So as much as I don't like it, and as much as I may be surrounded by inordinate wealth in Qatar and getting diluted with the thinking about how much things do and don't cost, you could find yourself making an argument that at some point, if this boy continues his progress, he and a couple of others that this question doesn't lead towards may well be in a £100 million bracket. I think it would be unarguable that if Pep Guardiola continues with his avaricious appetites for wanting to be successful, the fact that he signed a new deal with Man City quietens down the noise about whether Man City can continue to progress if Guardiola was going to leave, because now he's not. Is it a good thing for the Premier League? Yes and no, because you keep an elite manager in the elite league in terms of economics. You keep a brand and style of football that people are aspiring to. Could it lead to something that I don't like, which is potential dynasty speak? And we're not far from it in terms of the Premier League, not in Europe, of course, because they haven't won in Europe, and I wouldn't put them past it to do it this season. But I think it is challenging for others in the Premier League, because this guy, is, despite going away on the break, losing to Brentford, this guy is ultimately moving into the territory of being one of the most successful, if not the most successful Premier League managers, not because he's won as many titles as Ferguson, but because he's condensed the amount of titles that he's won in such a short space of time and doing them consecutively and winning title after title after title, and people aren't getting a look in. So it's interesting that he wants to commit his future to Man City for this period of time. It's interesting that other people might make an argument that it lacks ambition. I can't really see why that would be the case, because there was a lot of political stuff at Barcelona. He'd run his course there. Bayern Munich was what it was, but at Manchester City, I think he's happy. I think he's happy in this country. I think he's been given an opportunity to build a legacy. Manchester City isn't a legacy football club. Barcelona already was. Bayern Munich already was. Manchester City will start to become a legacy football club. When we talk about aristocracy in international football, or more to the point, European football, and we make this argument about the self-preservation of the big clubs in Europe that have wanted to keep the Man Cities and other clubs down, that's because the perception of legacy forms part of that maybe pseudo-arrogance. He will build a legacy club if City continue to dominate English football and can then make that footprint stick on European football. He's built Manchester City into not just a club that's bought its way to success and has got connotations behind it with allegations of breaches of financial fair play and whatever else. he will have built a football club that is indelible on the memory and will then be sitting up there with these aristocratic clubs. So I think it's a very interesting scenario. It's great for Man City, but not so good for the rest of the Premier League, I suspect. I've been pleasantly surprised by the nature of the people that I meet in this country. I've been able to meet from the Uber driver up to the president of PSG, and I've seen an attitude and outlook which is a very comfortable, happy country. You know, Nasser Al-Khelaifi is probably one of the most charming and elegant men that I've ever met, and most well-mannered men. I know there are questions that I will want to ask him about sports washing and Middle Eastern money, and my views on what PSG and Man City have become or will become. But I have enjoyed the experience here, and I'm enjoying it. I think it's a country that's got a long way to go. It's evolving, and it will change. And the more that people talk to the Qataris about the necessity to change, and I don't mean lecture, and I don't mean footballers coming over here with armbands or taking the knee. I mean constructive conversations that enable a society to evolve. And don't forget, this was a British protectorate up until 1971. It was part of our empire, so we might want to have a look back at our own footprint in here. But I've been pleasantly surprised by the whole attitude and outlook. And of course, now that more importantly, the tournament started, it's great to see England away. But what about Saudi Arabia for this region beating Argentina? Not just because they've beaten Argentina, because this was written as Messi's World Cup, wasn't it? And we've had to listen to Gabriel Batistuta give Jim White a lecture about how England can't defend. Score: Saudi Arabia 2, Argentina 1. Messi is one of those players that is an absolute phenomenon. And this idea that we have to label him as the greatest of all time, and that we have to look back and say, that in order to achieve that, you have to have done this. I just think you look at Messi's track record as a footballer from the moment he started kicking a ball to where he is now in professional football. He has been an elite player. You've had this embarrassment of riches. Very rarely have you had. We've had the timings between Johan Cruyff and Pele overlap, and maybe Eusebio in that conversation as well. And you've seen George Best and him flickering on the stage, but never being able to do it at international level because Northern Ireland wasn't able to compete at that level. I think Messi, in my mind, isn't the greatest of all time. As much as I find Ronaldo's whine-a-thon at times quite repugnant with Piers Morgan, I do think the fact that Ronaldo has played in teams that have won competitions at the international level, have played in leagues across Europe, and I know that Messi has now moved at this stage of his career to PSG, but Ronaldo's plied his trade in England, Spain and Italy and come out on top in all of those leagues. I don't think Messi's the greatest of all time. I think he's mercurial. I think he's a genius. And if I'm into that splitting of the hairs between the greatest of all time, I would always be slightly sentimental and say it was George Best. But for this argument, because of the international football framework, because of the amount of goals that these two boys have scored, I'm going to say Messi comes in second to Ronaldo. I flew business class because I don't feel the necessity to have my knees up around my ear rolls on a plane. So I flew business class, which was a nice experience, but it was tragically diminished by the fact that Jim White was up there. You know, worse than Jim White's, if you think that was bad, I had a slobbering, snoring wildebeest in Gabby Abonglaher within my earshot and eyeshot. But travelling with Jim is always an experience because he even found an opportunity to interview one of the stewards. I was surprised he wasn't in the bleeding cockpit interviewing the pilot. Right, that's it for this week. Thanks for watching this World Cup special. Now keep on leaving those questions in the comment section below because we've got another one coming in soon. Keep liking and subscribing, and I'll see you very soon.